Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Snowball Wealth Podcast, where we talk about how to manage debt and start building wealth, especially if you're the first in your family to do so. My name is Tanya Menendez, and on today's podcast, we're going to talk about student debt. And as our guest, we have Briana Franklin, President and CEO of the Prosperity Project. With the Prosperity Project, Bri is leveling the playing field for Black women with student debt. She's raised over $400,000 in funding to impact hundreds of borrowers and provide education and workshops around tackling your student loans. Welcome to the show, Bri.
Thanks. It's such an honor and privilege to be here and be part of this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. And, student debt is such a big topic, and especially now. I'm curious to hear, what does the Prosperity Project do and how did you get started with it?
Yeah, so TPP is a nonprofit, and our key focuses are two things, which is eradicating the now $2 trillion large student debt crisis and also helping level the socioeconomic playing field for Black women who are most adversely affected by it. And our origin story is definitely not one that most people are used to hearing. It had nothing to do with nonprofit training or me waking up one day and deciding that I wanted to venture into this space. Leading up to it actually was a struggle of my own with student loan debt. So, in attending Dartmouth College, I racked up a healthy $100,000 in principal that became 116 by the time I went into repayment about 2.5 years after I graduated. And just the challenges that came with owing so much debt, but then also simultaneously not really having much luck when it came to finding well paying, stable job positions. It was really tough. My debt to income ratio was astronomical. I had experiences working contract jobs, temp roles. I, at one point, just had to roll up my sleeves and pick up not one, but two retail jobs just because
Wow.
things had gotten so critical. And it was really important that I just start making money any way that I could really guarantee to just start putting something towards that. And so from those experiences, I just remember so much pain and frustration and just feeling like if this is the best that we're able to do for today's young people, then that's a massive failure in this country. And
Hmm.
also, I think the apathy, right, along the journey, like I would tell family and different people I'd open up to about it, and there'd just be some very apathetic, like, oh, I don't know what to tell you, that's just life kind of attitudes. And so it just rubbed me all the wrong way. So when everything heated up for Black Lives Matter in summer 2020, it really was go time. And I was able to turn those experiences into a path forward, not just to get myself out of that situation, but to start taking measurable action to help others in the same boat as well.
Oh, and I think that, a lot of what you've just shared, I think resonates with a lot of people where, you go to school, you're trying your best, right? You're um, looking to move ahead in your career, but sometimes things just don't shake out the way that they should, and sometimes you don't even know what you're getting into. And
Yeah.
so, with over 100,000 in student loans, how much was your monthly payment?
For private loans alone, $750. And I didn't
Whoa.
even get into the federal because, thank goodness they're comparatively better structured, right?
Yeah.
To where they're willing to just give you almost endless grace to figure it out and get the
Yeah.
money. Whereas private, it's like, nope, you are in the boxing ring with them once that 18
Mhm.
months forbearance is exhausted. And it's like there's really no grace period once it runs out. So, yeah, I just managed to keep it only private that I was repaying, but even still at $750 in those payments. Meanwhile, my income during that time was either non-existent, or
Mhm.
if I was getting paid and had landed some sort of, temp or contract opportunity, I mean, I'm making between 10 to 15 an hour, not even 40-hour work week schedule. So, I mean, ballpark is like definitely nothing north of 1,500 to 2K, if that.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned is important because, you get into this amazing university, you are planning to create this career, but it feels like you were, you had to take out these loans. It's not like it was something that you wanted to do for fun, and so did you know getting into the differences and taking out these loans, the differences between federal and private? And did you know that, did they tell you that the monthly payment would be this amount?
Oh, I had no knowledge of any of it. I just remembered signing the paperwork and every term. So we were on the quarter system, so not semesters, but at the beginning of every term, there was the whole promissory note song and dance, right? Where you get the
Mhm.
paperwork digitally, you have to initial off on the documents and answer these bogus, like busy work questions that really don't do enough to actually make it clear to a young person what it is they're signing up for. It's just more of
Right.
like, can you memorize what you read and then repeat it back to them? So, no, I had absolutely no knowledge to differentiate and absolutely no idea of the consequences. It was all just very nebulous. Like, people would hear that I was taking out debt, both family and the school. Like I remember at one point as a junior getting a call from the financial aid office and they were like, just so you know, you're borrowing on the heavier side. And I'm thinking, well, y'all are the one charging these outlandish prices.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know what you want me to do in terms of staying here now that I'm already 3 years in, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
want to start this and not finish. But it was just there's so much room for improvement for how that
Mhm.
went in terms of making it clear and just giving me a very accurate sense of what that was going to result in the event that I did or didn't have much luck
Yeah.
with employment once I graduated.
Yeah, and you know what? I think about this a lot because to start a business and to get a business loan, you go through all of these hoops and you have a credit check and everything. But when it comes to a student loan, they don't do nearly as much, checking and making sure that it's a good financial decision. And
Mhm.
many people, they don't realize that when you take out a private student loan, that you have to, there's limited grace periods for it. And you're even lucky to get an 18-month grace period. Some people are even more strict,
Mhm.
right? And so it can be pretty scary to have these creditor or these lenders kind of going after you. Um, so I'm curious to hear how you started, because I know that now you're in a you're in a different place, right? So can you share a little bit about how you started to pay down that student debt and how you started to form the Prosperity Project as a part of that to support other people on this journey?
For sure. So it's one of my favorite stories to tell because I find that a lot of people just find like, oh, there is hope. Like, my life is not completely helpless because of their situation. So um, it actually started from a very, very difficult point. It wasn't like some empowered, like, all right, like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was actually the moment when I had my I'm done with this moment. So as I mentioned, it was very challenging for me to keep up with those payments, and then also just the mental factor of feeling like it was literally me against this massive ocean of bills that I just was no match to keep up with. And it just took a toll on me. Like I just remember being like, what is the point? Because I make so little money and my job prospects are not nearly as strong as people tried to tell me that they were, that they would be from graduating with an Ivy League degree. And so I really just kind of was like, I give up. And so I let my loans go about 2 months late. And that was the nail in the coffin moment because it impacted not just but my co-signers, who were my dad and my stepmom, all three of our credit. And I don't know to what degree it impacted theirs, but I know in my case, it was an overnight 130-point drop and it wasn't soaring to begin with. So it's not like I went from 800 to, the mid 600s. It was about 600 to start with, or maybe a little higher. And then it was like 525 once that happened. And then my dad wrote me a very passionate email in response to his score change and was just like, I am so disappointed in you. And a lot of things that he was very right to feel. And I just was like, I'm not even going to get mad or defensive about this because he's right. And then that's when I had my light bulb moment of it's just time for me to roll up my sleeves and get to work. So I wasn't thrilled about it, but I picked up jobs working at Athleta and Orange Theory and just really hustled. I mean, I didn't take a single day off for the first month to start. And I mean, my hours were crazy. I was waking up at usually about 4:15, sometimes 3:30 if I had to open at OTF. And then I would drive up the street to Athleta and have to wolf down lunch for the 10 minutes in between shifts, and then get there from about 2 p.m. Until like we closed at 10. So it was just a game of hustle, making money. I started doing the debt snowball, and so that was helpful just for providing infrastructure. For those who don't know, that's Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps method for building wealth. The first step is save $1,000. The second is pay off all debt. So I hung out on step two for a while, and I'm technically still there, but I am now projected to be out of that by next spring when I turn 28. I set a very auspicious goal for being completely debt free by the time I turn 28. And so as I've continued this journey and just really, made learning business practices my life and immersed myself in the teachings of Shark Tank and, different business figures and people who I look up to, that gave me the foundation to move into that space and actually start up and continue to manage and grow an organization. And then, of course, it all comes full circle in the fact that we're helping people who are in this very boat, expedite that debt free journey. So it was very, very painful, but now I can say it's been really rewarding.
Yeah, and I know that the Prosperity Project is a nonprofit. So tell me about how you raised that $400 and what was the first check that came in and what did that feel like? I think a lot of people out there maybe have some goals to start their own nonprofits or their own business. So would love to hear your journey on how you got your first check.
Yeah. So because it was just a game of making something out of literally nothing, I have to credit LinkedIn, and hopefully one day this will turn into a brand up to represent them, because really that platform is how I was able to build Prosperity Project from the complete ground up. I In the months and years leading up to TPP, I went on an an ad spree, like adding people left and right. And I had racked up like 18,000 connections, and I had absolutely no basis of really knowing them individually. And when everything just was like at a standstill in summer 2020, and my gut intuition was just like, it's time to turn, this experience into action in some way. And then just all signs pointed towards crystallizing what started out as a survey project into a nonprofit. I was just like, well, okay, step one, like I formed the thing, but now it's time to get the word out. And so I went down that list of all 18,000 and some change people, and I reached out to get them involved in the survey project, because at first it was just collecting data around racial wealth disparities and different questions along those lines. And then it became clear from that data that, oh, Black women, even though I already knew, it was just like to see firsthand results of how
Mhm.
bad this gap was. I was like, okay, that's the direction I'm going to follow. And as those days and weeks went on, it very quickly just evolved one stage at a time. So then feedback went from being like, oh, yeah, happy to participate in the survey, to like, do y'all have a campaign I can donate to? My wife and I would like to donate. And so I was like, okay, fundraiser coming up next. And then on Juneteenth, we launched that on GoFundMe, just trying to figure it out. And then within a couple months, we had actually gotten our fiscal sponsorship. And so for nonprofits, you of course have to be independently recognized as a 501c3 to have deductible donations, so fully tax exempt donations. But because that is a lengthy process, it's not like just filing an LLC, which I learned because that was my experience. It's not an overnight thing. It can take months, if not a year at least, to get recognized. And that's if you qualify. So sometimes you go through that wait, and then they come back and they're like, no, this is ineligible. So we were able to get a fiscal sponsorship, and that allows us to operate with 501c3 status so that we can accept those larger charitable tax deductible donations. And so that, of course, became way more attractive to those same folks that I was courting and setting up calls with. And then I also came up with something called Operation Yes, which was the star studded version of that. So I came up with just any entertainer, celebrity, public figure, influencer, like you name it. I had 1,600 people who I just fleshed out all these names into a Google document, and some of our early volunteers comprised our community relations team. And I was like, all right, time to divide and conquer. We're going to reach out to every person on this list, and we will not stop until we get at least one yes. And Katrina Lake was our first one, and we were able
Ah,
to get, yeah, it was so exciting. She kicked in our first 15K. And then Lindsay Snyder Ellington, who is the granddaughter, I believe, of the In N Out burger restaurant chain founder, she donated 10K. So that was already 25 within our first 6 months of operations, which, as I've gone on to talk to more nonprofit professionals, they're like, you are a unicorn. Like, that just doesn't happen. So it's really rewarding that people trusted and believed in us so early on to that extent. And then, of course, it was like once we had that pedigree, and we could say, the founder of Stitch Fix believes in us to this extent. It was really attractive to others, and then eventually that lended itself to corporate interest through Goldman Sachs, and they funded us through the first round of the 1 Million Black Women Initiative. And since then, we've gone on to really develop a tight knit relationship that has continued to result in financial uh, support from them. So their first check was for 25K in spring of 2021, and this year they re-upped us for 150, which is just like, I can't even believe I'm saying these words. So all of that to say that it was just a matter of persistence and being very intentional, and just not being afraid to reach out to whomever I could.
oh, what an inspiring story. And congratulations on getting that renewed and all of the work that you're doing. And so now that you have the money, you took out the student loans, you started to pay them down. You're now starting this nonprofit to help others pay down their student loans. And so, how exactly does the nonprofit help other Black women or help further research? I know that I participated in your conference, but just so that the audience knows also how they can benefit by working with you.
Yeah, so our flagship program is called the 35 to Free Initiative, and that gets its name from the $35 billion in student debt, as well as 35% rate of financial literacy that Black women hold collectively in the US. And really early on, our founding team, it was just intrinsic. We were like, okay, helping Black women with student loan debt is mission number one. And so as time went on, we were able to actually crystallize the program and create a completely custom curriculum all the way from scratch with the help of our coaches, who are finance professionals. They have CFPs, CPAs, and are very skilled in personal finance instruction. So basically, the way that the program operated, we actually just completed our first run of it this month, and on December 10th, which was really thrilling to see come to fruition. But it was an 8-month program in total. So the first 6 months were FinCo, financial coaching, and that was one module a month where our Prosperettes, we had 12 this year, would meet in small group settings with their coaches, and then also come together collectively for the monthly seminars. And they were learning everything from budgeting basics to real estate, investment, um, the stock market, and so forth. And we got a lot of awesome feedback, just sharing that they really did learn a lot, and they were able to start even applying those tips and tricks, like when it came to building credit and being more strategic with their credit spend so that they could get points, and all the rest. But then the other component was CDEV, career development, which was 2 months after FinCo wrapped up. And then that's more of a broad brushstroke, just in helping them level up professionally, right? So we're talking about salary negotiation. We had a 4-part workshop that they got to do. We did an entire session on being your own self advocate, um, how to negotiate for a raise. What else? There are so many different topics. I would take up a whole other segment,
Yeah.
but the really cool thing, though, on top of all of that, was as they went through the program, were awarded up to $10,000 in what we call a
Oh.
retroactive scholarship. So that was money that we paid directly to the lenders of the Prosperettes. And as they went through, they got to see those balances get cut down. And in some cases, they started our program with as much as $293,000 in student debt. So, in that case, it wasn't as like massive of a needle being moved, but it still, we saw was really beneficial. So we're excitedly going to be scaling that effort to help 25 members next year. But also, we started doing preventative work through another program called Hire versus Hire. So that's HIRE, which is an acronym, versus higher as in higher education. And this is basically just like a no holds barred interception measure that keeps high schoolers from making the same dumb mistakes that
Mm-hmm.
I did, that I talked about
Mm-hmm.
earlier, of just signing my life away and not even knowing it, and
Mm-hmm.
just helping them be really vigilant and knowing how to detect and avoid predatory debt traps, and also just be more intentional in furthering their education period, because we realize that in today's day and age, a traditional degree really is not the magic ticket that it used to be for previous generations. So, we want to honor that and just make sure that students have what they need to succeed.
I love that. And, it's funny that basically helped alleviate 10,000 in student loans for 12 women. It's more than the government, it was, hopefully that does go through in terms of forgiveness.
Oh, don't
But,
get me started.
um,
I
you
hope.
know,
hope.
but it's amazing that you were able to do that directly and that you're going to be doing that again next year. And even if, out of 200,000 plus, I'm sure it was a huge relief for someone to have that dent, or at least a dent put into that debt. I'd love to hear from you, like, why do you think that student debt affects Black women more? Can you talk about some of the factors that play into, Black women being, you know, um, you know, yeah, Black women having more, being impacted more by student debt?
Oh, of course. Yeah, so I mean, we've broken this down and been able to really help identify to our prospective donors and target donors, how this has all come about, and it certainly is no accident. It's very systemic and intentional. So, the first thing is we start out very, very vulnerable to predatory lending, because so many of us come from homes that are not very well off financially, and so, because we start out under resourced, we're forced to overborrow, to keep up with these ridiculous costs. And I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? Because it's like,
Hmm.
if schools actually had some sense and did not exploit, the
Hmm.
whole prestige of the degree, we wouldn't be seeing the 9% year over year increase for these tuition rates that we do see. So that's the
Hmm.
thing, number one. But then also, there's discrimination at literally every turn. So,
Yeah.
as I can speak from experience, it can be really tough out here trying to
Hmm.
find a job that will pay you your worth and that will truly
Hmm.
value you in the way you deserve with all you bring to the table. And so many of us get overlooked for those really big ticket opportunities and promotions. And then, we're way overrepresented in the minimum and low wage labor force, right? So blue collar jobs, pink collar jobs, as some of them are now called. So uh, that's, how it starts to widen the disparity. But then there's the degree chase rat race, as I like to call
Hmm.
it, where it's like this hamster wheel, because so many of us are just told, get another degree. If you want to increase your earning
Hmm.
potential, just go get that master's, go get that
Hmm.
doctorate, whatever. And you see it on social media, like so many people who just value the prestige of a degree, but they're not talking about what it actually is doing for them, if anything. It's just like degreed and out here educated, and it's like, I love the pictures, they look lovely, but is that actually helping get you to where you want to be? Like, are you aware of how this debt is going to impact you in the 6 months after you graduate, right? So it's just like constantly being told that that's the solution. And then the fourth piece is being overwhelmed by that debt. So, our income is consumed by debt 111%, which quite literally means that we owe money we just don't have. And
Hmm.
so there's just a lot, systemically at work that
Yeah.
is keeping us from being able to push past that, because debt is a massive depleter of wealth. And
Mhm.
I'm not even going to begin to quote the statistic because it's very recent and I don't want to butcher it, but it basically just quantifies to what extent that educational debt is robbing the Black community of our collective ability to generate wealth and then set up our next generations for more success. So it's really tragic when you think about it, but those are the key components of how it's all operating.
Yeah, and a lot of this, I think, to your point, is systemic, and that's something that we try to also share with our members. That sometimes people come to us and they have like shame and anxiety, and they like are blaming themselves for having this debt, but a lot of it is systemic. And I think like having being able to forgive yourself for that and not having that blame on yourself, I think, is a big step in trying to make progress. um, and how, what is your advice for, say that someone is listening and they have over 100,000 in student debt? Like, what is your advice to help, get them motivated, but also help them kind of be kinder to themselves for having that, having made some of those decisions or having taken out some of that debt?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So the first thing, because I think it's so much mental, it's not just a matter of finance. Like some people say it's mental, it's also math. So on the mental side, give yourself grace and recognize that you were simply trying to do what you thought was necessary to set yourself up for opportunity, and the fact that that backfired is not your fault. That's
Hmm.
the fault of people who have put profit over people and who have been allowed to continue perpetuating the system completely unchecked. So understand that you're in a boat with 40 million plus people who have all to some extent been burned by irresponsibility. But then the next step is, regardless of how you ended up in that boat, it's yours to get out of. And so that should be an empowering thing to hear, because I think so many people are just like, it's not fair. And well, if, these schools and these just ruthless lenders did this to me,
Hmm.
like I shouldn't have to pay it. And I mean, ideally, karma would went out and have its way, and it wouldn't be, the borrower's responsibility to pull themselves out of this massive, um, valley. But at the end of the day, it is your credit on the line. It is your financial
Hmm.
future on the line, and it's it started with them, but it can end with you. So you
Hmm.
have to just really be diligent about making the adjustments needed, because you absolutely have that power. Like, as you heard me say earlier, I felt so overwhelmed and I thought, what is the point? Like, clearly, I guess I was just put on earth to pay the rest of this debt and then pass away. But I'm like, absolutely not. Like,
Hmm.
God has a higher purpose and wants me to help people. And yes, this is a terrible, terrible situation to be in, but I know that with making some strategic changes, I can begin to get myself out. So yeah, just on the math side, on that piece, write it down, because when you can at least see what you have working, to work with and to pay off, it just makes it so much more doable. Because for years, I'm not kidding, I was afraid to look at my number, just having been spooked by that phone call. I still remember, I can still hear that representative's voice from now 7 years ago, talking about, you're borrowing on the heavier side, just FYI. So I was afraid. I was like, okay, well, whatever it is, it's probably going to be way more than I'll be able to pay off in the next 50 years. But you got to know your numbers. You got to know your interest rates. Credit Karma is a great tool because it centralizes every
Hmm.
credit account that you have. So credit cards, mortgage, car loans, student debt, of course. And it puts it all right there and is just a really helpful tool for being able to make sense of it. But then also the debt snowball method, I can't recommend it enough. And the 7 baby steps in general, I think, are a completely fail proof template to follow if you're just trying to get some basic foundations under your feet. And, the first step does say save $1,000. I know some people who bypass that just because they're like, look, this debt is just too crazy. Like, I can't even set 1,000 aside. I get it. Um, But, at least once you get to that second step of just aggressively paying down your debt, figure out your debt tolerance, because I know that some people are going to be like me, where it's very scorched earth and like, to hell with that. Like, I'm done. I want it out my life as soon as possible. Others are like, I just want to get it under control. So that looks like refinancing, or consolidating, right? So that way you don't have as many payments to track. It's just one, it's a lower interest rate, what have you. But there definitely are options out there. And of course, Prosperity Project, we do pride ourselves on being like a community for people in this boat. And in the next year, we'll have a lot of really great engagement opportunities, both online and in person, that are really targeted to help people at all stages of this journey. So just know, the short of it is, you're not alone, you're in control, and there is help out there.
I love it. I love it. And just wanted to give a quick reminder to everyone out there that has federal loans that federal student loan payments are still paused. So, it's generally recommended to hold off on doing any refinancing activities because you don't want to potentially lose out on that forgiveness. So, wanted to make sure that that was. That for people listening out there, that they, sometimes it makes sense to, if you have federal loans, to wait to see what happens with forgiveness, because it's possible that it could get forgiven.
Yes.
And then also we launched a net worth tracker that's free on our mobile app. And one of the components we were really intentional about was helping people see their interest rates per loan and per account. So wanted to make sure that people knew that that was available. But it was so wonderful having you on the show, Bree. Can you share how people can get in touch with you?
Yes, of course. So we're everywhere. Our website is the Prosperity, and I just want to notate that difference in spelling. So it's PROSPARITY project.org. The name is a mashup of the regular spelling prosperity and parity. So as you see it written out on the website, it's stylized with the parentheses around the A. Elsewhere on Instagram, also the Prosperity Project with an A. Prosperity Proj on Twitter. We have a YouTube presence, Facebook. We're trying to, ramp up our engagement there. LinkedIn also, we're very, very active. And in terms of supporting, we have an ongoing digital portal through GiveButter. So it's givebutter.com/the Prosperity Project. And that's how to donate if you are so inclined.
Awesome, awesome. And we will link all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for everyone listening to this podcast. If you're also interested in building wealth, check out our mobile app at the App Store. It's search for Snowball Wealth or online at snowballwealth.com. Well, thank you so much, Bree, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you. And sorry, one thing I wanted to add
Oh, yeah.
too. In 2 weeks' time, New Year's Eve at midnight, we will have released the application for 35 to free round two. So just stay tuned. As I already mentioned, that's where to find us and keep up to date. We'll be doing a live on the 31st to announce the details. So for anyone who wants to shave $10,000 off their student debt balance, private student loans in the new year, we're here to help. So definitely hope that you'll check out that application. But thank you so much, Tanya. Great conversation as always. And shout out to the Snowball Wealth community.
Awesome, awesome. All right, well, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.